Hello, one and all. I hope I find you well. We're doing something slightly different today. I thought what we'd do is because there wasn't a stream yesterday because there was something I had to sort of sort out. I thought what we could do today is we could have a go at a new theory, and this one's well, these are called decision trees. Okay, you might have heard of decision trees before. You might have done them in GCSE business or something similar. But if you haven't, they're a really, really useful way of making strategic decisions. They're just a way, basically, of getting a thought process down on paper so that you can discuss it using scientific decision making in terms of applying data to a situation rather than just going with your gut, because sometimes it can be very difficult to make decisions, and if we've got an amount of data or if we've got reasonable expectations of things and a little bit of data, then we can kind of go with that. So that's what we're going to try and do. All right, so what we'll do is we'll start off by I'll draw one up with you, we'll do one together, and then we'll go through a question and you can have a go at yourself. Okay, so let's go. So I've got the iPad sorted up here, so hopefully this will work, and I'll be able to draw on this with you. So first things first, basically what we're doing here is we're going to have an idea of two decisions that we want to make, or rather a decision that we want to make with two different options. Okay. So we start off right at the start. Let's get our thing. We start off at the start with what we call a decision node. Okay, this is a node. And a decision node is basically just the start of a decision tree. So it's showing that a decision has to be made. Now, in this case, there's two decisions. So what we do is we come off the decision tree with two options. Okay. Now, the first option in this one will say... it can be anything, it doesn't matter what it is, but for the purposes of this, what we'll say is we'll have a new product. Okay, so option one is to make a new product, and we'll have option two as, I don't know, building a new factory. Okay, something like that. All right, so we've got our new product in our factory. So we've got our understanding here of what sort of the expectation is of what we have to do. Now, in terms of this, then, what we need to do is we need to understand that there is a cost associated with both of these decisions, isn't it? And it can be expensive, it can be less. And we can't, you have to spend money to make money, they say, don't they? So don't be worried about very expensive decisions, because if they're very big decisions, they tend to be expensive anyway. So don't worry too much about that before you're making a decision. So let's put the new product, let's say that's going to cost us 2 mil. And we'll say the factory is going to cost us, I don't know, 1 mil. Now, with these, what I would say is try and stick to a specific way of like try and stick to the same units. So if we're talking in millions with this 2 million, 1 million, stay to 1 million. If it's 800,000, say 0.8 million. It just makes it so much easier for you in the long run. Okay, so this brings us to the end of sort of section 1. All right, so let's put section 1 here. Okay, so we understand what our decision is. We understand that there's two decisions to be made. We understand the costs that are associated with them. Now, the next section we go to, and remember these lines, the dotted lines aren't in it. I'm just using it just to demonstrate it. Okay. Now, sort of section 2, we put what we have is a thing called an expected value or an estimated value. So we'll put EV here so that we can draw attention to it. Now, your EV doesn't come in yet. You won't get that till later on, so don't worry too much about that yet, okay? Now, from your EV, though, basically what we're saying is that there is going to be a likelihood of success, all right? So off this, we need to give two options. We need to give a success option, and we need a failure, don't we? That's just to say that, I don't know, we make a new product and it doesn't work, or if there's a massive issue with it or something like that, okay? So the same for the one down here as well. So let's do a success. And we'll do a failure. Okay. Now, when we're talking about probabilities, if you remember back to when we were talking about probabilities a while ago, all probability has to add up to 1 to be a certainty, doesn't it? So what we need to do now is, what is the likelihood of this thing happening? And in this case, they will give you this in the exam, by the way. I'll tell you, we'll go into what they'll give you when we look at the question in a minute, but don't worry about it yet. They will give you most of this information anyway. You've just got to do some basic calculations. For this one, let's say the success is 0.2. And we'll say the failure is 0.8. Okay. Sorry for leaning forward too much. I'm just using this iPad. And what we'll say then for the one at the bottom, we'll say, I don't know, we'll say it's equals... so 0.5 for each. Okay, so we're saying at the minute the top one, the success level is 0.2, so it's a lot less likely than the failure. Not to say it is going to happen, but either way. Okay, so this is section 2. Okay, now sorry if it's going off a bit. As I said, I'll pull it down and you should be able to see it properly. Now, in terms of the next section, we need to use what are our likely outcomes, so our revenue levels of what we're expecting to happen. Okay, these will be given to you as well. So in this case, we'll say 10 million for our success. If we were successful, we're going to make 10 million. If we fail, we'll say we're going to lose 1 million. Remember, brackets means minus. And then for the ones down here, we'll say 2 million. We're going to make 2 million for this. And we'll say for the other one, if we fail, we're going to make 1 million. Because remember, failure isn't always a bad thing. We can still make money off things that we do like that. Okay, now. That leads us to, we'll say this is section 3. That leads us to the final section, which is section 4. And what we do at section 4, sorry, I'll just see if I can move that a bit so you can see it. Okay, there we go. Now, what we do on section 4 is we basically just do a couple of calculations now. So we take our success rate, we times it by what we expect to make, because that gives us like, all right, well, best case scenario, worst case scenario, basically. So for the first one up here, when we've got our 10 million, we know there's only a 0.2% chance of doing that. So we'll do 0.2 times 10 mil. Okay, then for the same one, so we know that there's a 0.8 chance of minus 1 mil, so times minus 1 mil, remember brackets, and then same down here, 0.5 times 2 mil, and then 0.5 times 1 mil. Okay, now that's all well and good. So we need to just do these quick sums, okay? So 10 million times 0.2, well, it's 20%, isn't it? So that must be 2 million. 0.8 times times minus 1, well, what's 0.8 of 1? That's minus. So that would be minus 0.8 million. There you go. For these, we've got 0.5 times 0.5 times 2. Well, that'd be 1, wouldn't it? And then 0.5 times 1 would be, well, 0.5 mil. Okay. Okay. So, aside from me blocking it there can you see? Right. Now, what we do then is we add them up. Okay. And that'll give us a number. So, in this case, we've got a 2 million... in this case, minus 0.8. So that will give us 1.2 on it. And then down here, we've got 1 million plus 1.5, plus 0.5. So that gives us 1.5 mil. Okay. Now you'll be thinking, well, what was the point of all that then? Well, because now what we have is we have two numbers which become our estimated value. Whoops. Sorry, it's just freaking out a little bit there. 1.2, and then this one is 1.5. Okay. Now, that means that essentially what we're saying is that we've got to make a decision now on what decision we make, essentially. So do we go with new product or factory? Well, you can tell me from this. What about the estimated values? Well, here it says that if we go with a new product, the likelihood is we're going to make 1.2 million. The likelihood is we're going to make that. overall. It could be worse, it could be better, but if we take all everything into account, if we go with the factory, we're going to go with 1.5. Now, there's one last thing I haven't told you about, and that's the third option that comes off the bottom of here, and that's got no modules or anything nodules on, and that's do nothing. Okay, so that would have 0 cost. Now, in terms of this, you might say, well, what was the point of that then? And the point is that your EV for this would be 0. Now, in this circumstance, you've got 2 positive options. You've got 1.5 or 1.2. So you've got 2 options, haven't you? Or your third one, which is 0. But what if, for argument's sake, both of these were minus? Like that. So minus 1.2 and minus 1.5, which the likelihood is we're going to lose money. What you need to do is go with that one, wouldn't you? Okay. So I hope that makes sense. I know it's quite complicated. So what we're going to do is we're going to get rid of all this, and then we're going to I'm going to show you how you would work through a real life example. Okay. So one moment. Let me just get rid of all this. In fact, you know what? I'm gonna do this. So let me show you a real world example.